Okay, so this morning, this afternoon, we basically have 3 questions that we're going to put to the panellists, which Ian flashed up on the screen earlier. And we've got about half an hour to talk about these 3 questions. They're quite big questions. I'm going to let each of the panellists have a go at answering the questions. And if you have any thoughts in the audience, please post them on the chat. We've got a Q&A session. So again, Ian's flashing those up. So you can see them. I'll take them one by one. But if we can put that screen down, Ian, so we can, I prefer to see people's faces. I've got the questions written down, so that's all good. So the first question, and this is a really, really critical one, and I asked Ian if we could have this question as the first one, which is about the barriers that we need to overcome. So the aspiration that we have here is between now and Birmingham Tech 2030, 10 years from now, we want to reach the position where diversity is a given and it's no longer a challenge. So in order to achieve that, the diversity being a given and not a challenge, what barriers do we need to overcome? So I'm going to ask Dan to kick us off on that one, please.
Yeah, thanks, Pam. I think it's about structure, first of all. So I think a lot of how do we break it down in a very simple, way. I know I shouldn't be using the word simple, but I think actually because of the connotations, diversity, and the term itself, I think where do we start? So for me, I think we've got to look at the pipeline. So we're here talking about Birmingham 2030, right? So that's 10 years. So where do we start? So for me, it's obvious, schools and young people. So I'll give you an example. My 2- and 4-year-old can navigate my phone, and in some cases better than I can. So if we're talking about 2- to 4-year-olds, then that's early years for me is where we start. So school, first of all. Then I'm thinking, right, let's talk about digital poverty, something that's come up quite a lot over the last few months. Students not being able to be contacted by their teachers and by their schools, not handing in homework on time. Issues that have come to the surface due to COVID. So let's look at the positives of COVID as opposed to the negatives. What issues have been brought up by that? And then lastly, for me, we talk about diversity. Well, what does diversity look like? For me, the top 3 things are gender equality, people coming from underrepresented areas, and disability. So let's take those 3 areas and then let's start to break those down and then look at those areas.
Thank you. That's a really, really clear starting point. So Harry, what's your view on this?
Yeah, so I think mine's not too dissimilar to Dan's. I think for me, it kind of breaks down into 2 categories. The first one that Dan was, well, both of them kind of fall into this category, really. The first one being about accessibility. So when we're talking about introducing this pipeline into the tech world, we always forefront the fact that tech is meant to be accessible in many ways, and that we are always looking for a new way to actually engage a new audience and stuff like that. However, we need to reflect that in a lot of aspects of how we are recruiting people, I think, in the first instance. So the first part I'd say with that I certainly see with job specs, for instance, getting quite specific, is to do with the actual writing of the job specs themselves. So within them, are we actually promoting the fact that there is flexible working within this, that we are really outwardly trying to engage with certain audiences? So and within that also to do with the actual equal opportunities that a lot of companies are boasting. These should be kind of frontline issues that we're putting out there. For example, I think that when Dan touched on the issue with female engagement, especially in the tech industry, I think it's around 2/3 of women say that they fear about asking about parental leave at the interview stage because they think it'll leave a negative impression on the world, on their actual interviewer. And as well as our intentions can be with a lot of tech industries with them promoting their policies. We need to make that headline and out there. And second of all, when we're talking about the networks themselves, engaging in dialogue with those who are seeking the help is the most important thing. First of all, when we're talking about in the later stages for more senior positions, need to think about how we are actually recruiting and, but more importantly, where are we advertising these positions? If we're advertising them in already tech-heavy, what's the word? Marketplaces. So within, I don't know, within your own singular network, you're not going to reach those people. We need to really partner with organizations that are building that pipeline themselves, and kind of foster kind of this support for a multi-variety of diversity. So building that culture within our networks. Yeah, to be honest, with the pipelines themselves, we can talk all we like about we need to get new diverse people in that we haven't regularly seen before in the tech industry. However, without actually engaging with the schools and with young people, then that's not going to happen. We can't expect by the time students are 18, 19, 20 and coming into the employment market that they are going to be there. It needs to come at a lot earlier stage in order to actually engage them well. Yeah.
Thank you, Harry. That's adding lots of agreement, but lots of additional points added in there as well. I'll hold back on any of my own thoughts until I've let all the panelists speak. So, Kari, do you want to have a go at this one now?
I think I definitely agree with what's been said before, in the fact that I think we need to be looking a lot earlier when it comes to kind of the talent pipeline. I think there's sometimes the assumption that everyone's going to want to go into tech as soon as they come out of university, and we kind of ignore the route before that. And I think the gender disparity especially is something that happens in school. I'll give you an example. I run workshops for different age groups of kids. If I work with like a group of 10-year-olds, there'll be more likely a 50-50 gender split. As soon as I start working with 15, 16-year-olds, that then skews into being primarily boys. And something has happened in that gap for that to suddenly change. And I think that's a mixture of two things. I think one, it comes from there's not enough support for young people in schools, especially from disadvantaged backgrounds. I think that sometimes people have the talent, they want to do something, but they find that they don't really have the support to actually do anything with that. We talk about like the digital disparity and things. If a child has not even got a computer at home, how are we expecting them to then gain the skills to want to go into a tech career? In the same way that I think companies do need to take more responsibility to ensuring that that happens earlier on, so they get a more diverse talent pool rather than relying on people that have already got that support. And I think secondly, I think there's a major perception issue in the tech industry from a young person standpoint, which, to be fair, I don't know whether it's wrong, the perception is, of the fact that it is all middle-aged white men in positions of power. And it's something that I've found before, and I think that's where companies need to be taking responsibility themselves to try and change that inherently as well, in their own things they're doing with events and stuff. So for example, it's okay for someone to sit back and allow their kind of event to literally just be a room full of men. And it doesn't feel welcoming. And I really wish it was hyperbole for the fact that events are all men, but I have attended an event myself where I've been the only female in a room full of 60 men. And it's like, that isn't a welcoming thing to promote to young women. Same as like at a board level, we need more representation, and that will start to trickle down, and hopefully through that providing support for allowing people to see that people like them, women, people of different races and stuff can do well in tech careers. That will hopefully start to sort of force change for the future.
Thank you, Kari, and you've just given an absolutely brilliant advert for our new Voices of Innovation database, which is exactly targeting that last point that you made. So last but not least on this question, Darren, do you want to take the floor?
Yes, thank you, Pam. So I mean, I echo all of the views that have been shared so far. Completely agree. I think the question should also be, we should also be thinking about what do we mean by pipeline. And I think the pipeline, you know, we've talked a lot about grassroots, which is absolutely correct, and we do need to look at talent at that level and how we can grow it and how we can nurture it and how we can bring it through. But we also need to look at who's around today. But equally, looking at given where the world is and the fact that people are retiring later and living longer, we also need to look at people perhaps of older generations as well, and how can we support and help those people to increase the level of innovation and the level of entrepreneurialism that we see. So I think the first point is it needs to be the end-to-end pipeline. We need to look at it at different points. Secondly, I also think that entrepreneurialism, innovation comes in lots of different shapes and sizes, right? So we need to think about the different camps of people. Maybe that's a term, but I think when I think of diversity, I think of ethnicity, I think of gender, I think of sexual orientation, I think of age, I think of race and colour. And I think one thing that's really, really important that we shouldn't do is have a one-size-fits-all approach to each of those groups. They're different. And I can give the example of, being a person of colour myself. I know that there are certain approaches that will stimulate me, that will bring me out and get me involved and help me to grow as an entrepreneur or to grow as a person within business. That may not be the same approach that would work with somebody who doesn't look like me, for example. So I think it's really important we don't have a one-size-fits-all approach. And yeah, I'll leave it there, Pam.
Thank you very much. So some really interesting, good range of answers there. Just a couple of things that I'd like to add and reflecting on those. I mean, I think one of the compelling things we've got to get across to employers is that we actually need the full diversity. This is not a nice to have, but actually we have a skills shortage in tech areas, and there's actually an economic argument quite apart from all the moral arguments of reaching out to the full diversity. And I agree with Darren, that's the full age spectrum and all ethnicities and every other form of diversity. And I do wonder, and I think some of you touched on this, if I was interested in the discussion, particularly around job descriptions as somebody who employs people, if we need to encourage employers to think more about aptitude than experience. And I know that that's been said by a number of people, and I know it's one of the things that Dan has talked about in the past as well. So some really interesting points made there. So that there's another element of this though. So I think we've probably talked about, schools and employers, etc. But actually, there's a question I want to explore, which is about self-identification. And I think this comes back to some of the points about confidence that comes from support. So how do we create more innovators that self-identify as entrepreneurs and intrapreneurs? So how do we get people to recognise themselves as this kind of new generation of people? So I'm going to mix it up a bit this time, and I'm going to ask Darren to speak first this time.
Thanks, Pam. So how do we create more innovators? So my view on this is that we need people to recognise that they are innovators, that they do belong. So I can probably share my own personal experience here and say that as a person who grew up in South London in sometimes economically challenged situations, I have gone on the journey of that whole self-discovery journey. How do I and what I mean by that is that I've had to try and reposition how I think about myself. I've had to try and build that confidence in myself and my ability to work within the tech industry. And I think when I sort of layer on top of my own personal experience with what I do with schools or what I've done with schools and kids in schools, I think that one of the things that we really, really need to do I'll bring an example. I did a workshop for a school in Croydon earlier this year, pre-lockdown, and I had a number of kids aged 10 and 11, and I basically ran through a talk about my career and what I'd done, and they were all astonished that somebody who'd come from a very similar background to them could have achieved what I've achieved, and I've still got a long way to go in my life and my career, but they were astonished. They're not used to seeing people like that, people like me around. And I think one of the things that we need to do is we need to make people who have been successful, and success can be defined in many different ways, but people who have been successful, more visible to people at grassroots, more visible to people who are currently operating in business and perhaps need some help and support. So I do think that that whole role model theme is massive. I also think that we need to work out how we can provide coaching support. I mean, I was reading a report which was basically saying that in the West Midlands, there are a number of entrepreneurs the West Midlands is considered as being one of the areas with the most largest number of ethnically diverse entrepreneurs. How can we provide support? How can we get closer to those people and give them the support that they need so they can grow their businesses? And I think through the role modeling, I think through coaching, I think through having some sort of database that you talk about and connecting those two dots to get those dots together is how we can definitely help to drive that change.
Brilliant, thank you very much indeed. There's some discussion on the chat about the see it to be it approach, which I think is really very much echoes what you're saying there, Darren. So if we can have Harry next, we're trying to change the order here.
Yeah, sure thing. First of all, my main comment straight away is that I don't think that we need to create more innovators. I think the innovators are there already. It's not that we're trying to mold them into something else. It's that the talent is there. However, there's one key thing that they're all missing, and that is opportunity. The opportunity for them actually to be in an environment which kind of fosters this creative thinking and the collaboration. From working with young people, so I've been at Digital Innovators now for about 18 months, working with young people, mainly within colleges. And when I've seen them, the actual education system itself isn't fostering and isn't really an environment in which it's pushing the mindset that entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs certainly need. It's fostering a certain way of thinking, which arguably has trickled down into the rest of society, in which sometimes we aren't seeing entrepreneurs. So for myself, I think that it is about providing this opportunity. We've always, when I was younger anyway, we were put into this work experience bubble in which we were given these opportunities as such to try and figure out what we were doing with our lives and figure out what was actually working for us. And within all these opportunities, there was not really any scope to either develop the business itself or kind of develop some sort of it. And I think that that's where we certainly kind of lack the capabilities for certainly young people to find themselves as entrepreneurs or intrapreneurs, because from seeing hundreds of students over the past year or so, there's certainly a lot of them there that do have the capabilities, but they are not aware of them. And so being able to actually instill critical thinking and collaboration and creativity into young people at a lot early stage, and giving them the opportunity not to do that necessarily within education, but in the wider world, I think that is should be the priority in a lot of cases.
Thank you. That's great. We're a bit short of time, so I'm going to jump straight over to Kari on the next one, on this question.
Yeah, I think it is a skills issue fundamentally, from kind of a young standpoint, in the fact that a lot of young people either don't have the right skills that they can do this stuff, or don't feel like they have the right skills to actually go and become an entrepreneur. I think there is a perception that it's kind of a scary word, and I think there's this sort of thing that it's been broadcast that it's like you have to do everything by yourself and it's super difficult and stuff. And I always try and promote to young people that it's kind of obviously it's a soft skills that they need to do this sort of thing that isn't actually taught in schools as well as it should be. Stuff like being able to speak and teamwork, and that's the key point, is the collaborative effort. I feel like there's not enough emphasis on collaboration and working with others at the moment, because really it's going to be very rare to find someone who is a super, like, in tech, who can do tech really, really well, and is also really great at selling and great at design and great at marketing. That doesn't work. So I think promoting to young people that they need to collaborate, work together, teamwork, stuff like that is really, really important to get more people to really think about innovation in more of an accessible way, rather than immediately assuming they'll have to do everything by themselves. So I think that's an important thing to, like, again, it's just like promoting those sort of skills that are actually needed for young people, so they feel like they can actually achieve kind of like entrepreneurship.
Thank you. And that actually very much echoes the point that was being made by Naomi, one of our speakers yesterday, about the soft skills. She'd come from an arts background and got into tech and found that her skills were really valued once she got into that area. So Dan, finally, could you have a go at this question, please?
Yeah, I think it's this whole topic of like innovation versus vocation. You know, being someone that comes from an traditional Indian family, it was like, well, when are you going to be a doctor or a lawyer? And ironically, I did actually graduate in law, but didn't go into it. And I think, you know, the pressures that young people get put under, I think is massive. I think we're not just talking about education and inspiration of young people. I think we also need to look at the other side as well, like their support network, their parents, their teachers. We need to listen to also educate them on how they can support children in obviously a non-condescending way. But I think the message is inconsistent. And I'm not just talking about careers. If you think about a son in tech, the automatic reaction is coding, whereas actually there's so many other roles out there, like how are you going to be a project manager, a business analyst, all the soft skills you need to undertake to go through that route. So that's something we're obviously working with our Inspire the Next Gen series, in terms of how we not only connect employers to schools, but how do we get them as not only role models, but to educate on what the routes into a tech career looks like: sales, marketing, UX, design. There's so many avenues. So we've got to educate externally as well as just to the young people.
Thank you. So some great answers to that question, and particularly I like the starting point that innovators already exist. We don't need to create them, but we need to find them and then encourage them. And I think all the rest of the points followed on from that. And there's an important point here, I think, about language that I'd like to emphasize, and that again came out at yesterday's event. And then that whole issue of support and/or pressure from peers, parents, schools, society, that we need to address it at all those levels, really, to give people the confidence to self-identify as entrepreneurs and innovators. So we'll move on to that. We're just a few minutes behind schedule, but we're not doing too badly. So if the next set of questions can be answers can be reasonably concise, that would be great. So the final question for the panel is, how do we develop a diverse talent pipeline that meets the employability needs of the future? So this partly comes back to my question about it's not just a nice to have or a moral issue. This is an issue of actually how we boost the economy, how we draw on our diverse population. So how do we develop a diverse talent pipeline that meets the employability needs of the future? So Kari, do you want to start on this one?
I think a key point is that employers need to inherently be involved in the actual process of actually supporting young people. I think I've seen it a lot with companies. I get told constantly, I can't find good talent in the region because they're relying way too much on schools and universities to do all of the heavy lifting and just pump out all this talent that's going to be perfect for them. And I always say we need to be targeting it early. You need to be running programs. You need to be approaching these young people before they get to that point. So I think employers need to really be doing more to work with young people to get to that point. And also, I think it's really key to have young people involved as well. I think there's a lot of young people at schools, at universities, who'd love to be involved in things, and they're not like the future. I feel like young people can get involved in projects now, and I think they really need to be kind of in the planning process. I always say young people need to be in the rooms where kind of decisions are made, and if you're making programs for young people, then please talk to us about it. So that's the sort of thing that I'm talking about, just in terms of employers need to be kind of there throughout the whole process. I always use the analogy of, you take something like football academies. You know, they work with young people from a really young age and build up that talent, and then they're there and ready for when they're needed when they're older. Why isn't something like that also done for tech? It would work really well, and it stops the issue of the fact that universities and schools aren't providing the right skills. So yeah, I think it's just a case of, I think employers need to be getting more actively involved in the actual education and skills process.
Thanks, Kari. I'd like to think that some of the schemes that we've been highlighting, like Digital Innovators and the work that DigiSheds is doing, is beginning to do that. They're kind of, I like the idea of them being the football academies for the tech world. So Alex, there's a new thing to put on your CV, and Mick, who I know is in the audience as well. So Dan, do you want to pick up this question about employability needs?
Yeah, I think it's just communication. I think, you know, from the work I've done with Rodrigues and Diversity Tech.
Sorry, Dan, we've got your a very strange echo going on there. So I'm going to go to Darren, and we'll come back to you if that's all right.
Thanks, Pam. I think so. My views on employer needs of the future. So I think what we need is an engine. Metaphoric engine, that's basically doing exactly, you know, what we said today. So looking for that talent, it's already out there. I think is, you know, a key point, and I totally concur with that. So we need an engine that's looking for the talent, identifying it, and then working with it to grow it and develop it, and moving it along the journey, so that when you know that talent reaches a certain point in its maturity, it's then ready for certain positions. But equally, also would like to bring in the theme about, you know, bringing organisations into play here. So, you know, Capgemini as an organisation, you know, bringing organisations like us into that engine, so that we are feeding in our requirements, so that as we are finding the talent, we're nurturing it, we're actually getting it ready for companies like Capgemini, you know, so that when the time is right, you know, those people can step into roles and opportunities. So I think it's, for me, it's all about creating that engine.
Thank you, Darren. Dan, we'll have another go at you now. I see you've plugged into an earphone.
Yeah, sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's better.
Yeah, too much tech. Yeah, I was just saying, I think it's communication. There's a lot of people that share the same ideas, same passion for the same purposes and the same goals. And I think, you know, what we've done with the Brum Muse and Diversity in Tech Brum isn't about reinventing the wheel. It's just about bringing people together as allies. And I think there's a lot of people that share that. And I think, you know, I will say one thing is that Kari said one thing to me a couple of months ago when I first connected with her. And she said that, you know, we don't listen to young people. We assume that we know what young people want. And actually that has resonated with me quite a lot over the last couple of months, about being able to listen more to young people's needs. So what we've done is we brought in the Aston Computer Science Society as a partner of the business now, in order to bring them as closer to it, because they are closer in terms of age, in terms of experiences. So we're going to utilize them as our sort of go-to people to be the listeners and the ears. So I think if we can do more of that, I think we're going to be quicker to actioning some of these solutions. But, you know, everyone, I believe, is on the same page. We just got to bring them and align them.
Thank you, Dan. So finally, Harry, over to you to finish off on this last question.
Okay, cheers. So I think there's kind of, for myself, there's kind of two parts to this question. The first one being about the actual developing the pipeline itself, and then the second part about the employability needs of the future. So with the first part of that, I think it really highlights what Darren was saying in terms of, this isn't a creation of a pipeline. This is a development. This is something that we are actually going to put time into students with, and we can't, of course, we can make it a box ticking exercise in which we can pick and choose diversity as we see fit, but it is about the development of those people, and with this second part then leading to the second part of the employability needs that I'm just about to talk about. Whenever I've talked to businesses, and I'm sure this resonates with a lot a lot in the tech industry is we say that there's a skills shortage. However, whenever we discuss what do you mean, what skills are you missing with employers, they can never say what skills they're defining. Is it the soft skills? Are you talking about the technical skills? Is it the communication? And they can never really pinpoint exactly what it is that new recruits are missing. So when we're talking about developing this pipeline, what I see, and certainly in Digital Innovators resonates with a lot, is that we teach the students about tools of adaptation. So how can you be flexible in this new working environment? Because we're talking about these needs of the future. However, given the past 8 months of this world, what are we talking about when we mean needs of the future? We can't really predict what it's going to be like in 10 years' time. We can't predict what it's like next month. So what we really need to be instilling is how we can make this diverse talent pipeline adaptable.
Thank you, brilliant. And that flexibility note is such an important one, as you say, especially in the current environment, but that kind of gives us a taste of what might be to come in the future. So really interesting discussion and questions, and a couple of reflections from me before we move on to the audience Q&A. So one of the things that came out of there is that we almost need, I think this was Darren's point about bringing the employers into this, we almost need to have a kind of see it to be it approach for the employers as well as for the individuals. So we talked about individuals seeing people that look like them, but companies almost need companies that look like them to give them the confidence to try and engage in this diversity agenda. And the question about engaging with the young is a really interesting one, because I think there's an assumption that everybody's been young once, so we all know what it's like to be young. But what we don't know what it's like is to be young now, and being young now is very different from when I was young, and when even Harry, you are a lot younger than me when you were young. So I think that listening and talking, but I think it's a two-way respect thing, because obviously we've been around, we know different things from young people, so it's communication is absolutely critical to all of this. So I'm really grateful to the panelists. Excellent answers, and I've written loads of notes, and I'm sure we're going to be blogging on this and thinking about it as we develop our work going forward. So I'm going to hand back to Alex now. He's been carefully looking at the Q&A coming in, and I'll hand back to him to manage that part of the process. Thank you.
Great, thanks Pam. Hopefully I'm not on mute again, so you can hear me. Yeah, so obviously a fascinating discussion, lots and lots of good points. A lot of them have been echoed by the people who have contributed with some questions and statements. One of the points about outsiders and neurodiversity kind of cropped up a number of times. I think that's a really good point. I think Kari made it, and two or three other people talked about that. How do you, I think Peter Cripps as well. So how do you kind of select those outsiders and grow them? And the outsiders, or the sense of being an outsider, is a theme that I think has been kind of running all the way through this discussion. If you're outside looking in, whether you're young, older, whatever, then how do you join? Where's the and Darren talked about an engine. So I see that as a plug and socket for employers. So we need to create plugs and sockets that people who are outside can just plug in. So how do you get in to that? And to make it easy, and we've talked a lot about language and communications and behaviors. So that was another theme. So we had Kelly talked about the messenger matters, was the theme that she wrote down, which is really the who says it, who invites. If it's the same old voices, it's the same old people, the usual suspects. If they're the ones already talking, it's a little bit. I like the sports analogy, Kari, because I'm kind of into football and stuff. So you will see a manager that's been very successful in a team that voice gets a little bit old, even the best managers, people stop listening so much. They stop feeling that that person is reflecting their view of how the team is run or how things are done. And I really do think that cycle of new voices, and I think that's why I think it's such an appropriate title for the database, because it by definition talks about recycling people, using the people who have been there, as Pam talks about, who've been there, done it, to start to then recycle and grow new people and pull them up, pull them in, plug them into the engine, if you like, and then hand the baton over, and then it keeps you keep going in that way. So I was just mindful that I've just been reading actually some stats about the West Midlands around the density of ethnic entrepreneurs. Apparently it's the highest outside of the northwest of London. It's 16% of self-employment workforces are ethnic entrepreneurs. And actually that 30% of ethnic minorities engaged in recent product or service innovation. So they are the most innovative as well, which was a stat I had no idea. And it talks about since 2002, typically ethnic minorities have reported a higher total entrepreneurial activity rate. So this is exactly the point I think Darren was making, is that don't make a one size fits all. If you start to work with the individual groups, and we've talked about neurodiversity, we've talked about ethnic diversity, we've talked about background. There was a comment, 2 or 3 comments about people from outside of that accepted background. So again, another outsider comment. So background is really important. So creating that opportunity for people who just will find it, who don't, and giving them these role models that look like them. I think, and look like me is a kind of a, obviously that's a physical thing, but sound like me, behave like me. And we call that tribes. And we're trying to grow 1,000 tribes, because people self-select into different tribes for whatever reason. So, that tribe could be about just where they live, or it could be the fact that they like trainers, or they like football, or they like, I don't know, whatever, music. So those tribes, whatever gets them involved, whatever allows them to plug in, I think is really relevant for us to start to create this engine. I quite like that concept, but then probably because I'm a bloke, a bit blokey bloke. So I think I like the idea of this kind of something that moves with the times, that creates the opportunity for someone like Kari. I don't think I'm pronouncing that right. Is that Kari? Is it Kari? Is that right? Kari. Yeah.
Yeah. Don't worry, everyone gets it wrong. It's all right.
No, I don't want to be everyone. I want to get it right. Kari. Okay. So Kari, I mean, some fantastic points. One of the ones that I wrote down, just kept circling, was innovation and entrepreneurialism is a team sport. I just think that's just absolutely right. If you cannot be an entrepreneur, you cannot be an innovator on your own. That there's no such thing. You will need support. You will need people to bounce ideas off. You will have the go-to people who are really good at crafting the message in a creative way. I think Harry said that. How do you create that creative thinking, that kind of grasping people? So that is not something that everybody has. I'm an entrepreneur, but I've surrounded myself with much cleverer people than me, and I just harvest their ideas and take credit for them. So that's what I'm good at, is taking credit for other people's ideas. So I'm just kidding. I'm not good at that. But the point is, I think we have a fantastic, and you can see it here, and you saw it yesterday. We have a fantastic wealth of talent. We have the motivation. We have the mindset. And I'm just picking up a few more statements.
Alex, can I just jump in? Mick Westman's particularly asked if he can respond to some of the things that you've just been saying there. Would that be okay?
Sure, yeah. Actually, why don't we open it to people to do that? If you want to put your hand up, I think we've got a few minutes. Can we do that?
Yeah, I think so. So Mick, do you want to start off?
Yeah.
I just want to build on a point that Alex made, which I think is really, really insightful, actually, which is...
You've never said that before.
No, you pay me later, Alex. It's this thing about, as we mature, as we get older, then our gravitas kind of reduces. That's natural. That's just what happens with people. And I remember reading a review, a Harvard review. It's about probably 10 years ago now, but it was talking about leading from behind. And I think what we've got to really understand is when Kari said that we've got to get in and understand these young people, I think we have to get behind these young people. So I'm inspired when I listen to people like Kari and Harry and all the people we heard yesterday, because they've got the ideas and they know what to do, but they don't know how to do it. So I think our job is to position ourselves behind them, not in front of them. So we're not telling them how to change the world. We're enabling them to change the world. So I think that's the shift we need to make. And you know, Pam won't thank me for saying this, but you know, I came back into the Midlands about 4 years ago, and the same discussion was going on about skills 4 years ago as is happening today. Great news is we've actually got some people on a call here who want to do something about it, which I think is brilliant. But until we actually change the dialogue, I don't think we're going to make the change happen. So for me, it's about leading from behind. That's all I wanted to say, really. Yeah,
apart from the mental metaphor for that disturbs me, but I know what you mean.
And this is the man who was dancing 10 minutes ago.
Listen, we've moved on from that. I'm sure we have. Yeah, so I mean, a great point. I think we are continually echoing the point about support, about how do we support young people, how do we get behind them, encourage them, create the platform, create the motivation, give them the right field to play in. Anybody else has got? I can't imagine. Yeah, Drew, I thought I was going to say that you must have something to say. Go on, Drew.
Thanks, Alex. Well, first of all, Kari is amazing, isn't she? Can you
some
imagine?
Of us are all right as well, mate.
Yeah. Can you imagine at 15 years old going to Zurich and doing a speech at a TEDx talk? I don't even know what I was doing. I was probably doing a paper round at 15 rather than changing the world. It's mad.
Yeah, agreed.
I'd like to touch on what Mick and Alex have said about working and following behind the young people. And I think one of the difficulties that I see in the West Midlands, this is Birmingham Tech Week, and that is it's almost like a cabal where to try to get people on those boards to be engaging and to be inclusive, it's almost like there's playing lip service to it. So instead of being on those boards, another separate board is created. There's a young person board, there's a digital board, offshoots, and not the main board where the decisions are made. And what I'd like to see is somewhere, I read it somewhere, there's a government document on the role of a chairperson. And the role of the chairperson is supposed to ensure that the community is reflected in that board. And I'd also like to say that the community is not over-represented by individual parties or one particular tribe. And that can be not to be over-represented by gender, ethnicity, age, or neurodiversity, where they all come from the same university. So I do think we've got a lot of work to do, and it is good that we're having these conversations, but some of the people that should be involved in some of these conversations are not on some of these webinars. I've signed up to about 10 of these, and there's people that I believe should be on the webinar that are not actually there. So what do we do? How can we encourage them to be engaged, and how can we encourage new people to have a place on these boards?
Am I right? Sorry, really quick. Sorry, Alex. That what you guys are doing, you are going to give people a platform for that, in line with a conversation we were having a month ago about ambassadors and case studies, and if people want to be mentors.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what the New Voices campaign is really all about. you know, we won't do it overnight, but yeah, and I'll be saying a few words at the end of the meeting about how you everybody on this call can help us to build that database. I also noticed there's a few people popping up saying, I'd like to do more, I'd like to help. Obviously, one of the ways you can help is to engage with Alex and with Mick and the programs they're running, and with us on the database. So please leave your details on the chat if you want to be engaged, and we can make contact.
Yeah, I wanted to go back to the point Drew was making. I think it's a really valid one. I think his point is, and I'm hoping I'm doing it some justice, but I think what he's saying is that it is fine for us to do what we're doing, but that is another breakaway group. It is another database. It is another feeder. So I think one of the key actions has to be, how do we plug this in, and how do we give those people who are on that database the opportunity to either chair, facilitate, or even it comes to mind. There was a concept that was trialed, I know, by a number of senior leaders a few years ago. I'm not sure if it's continued, but it was 360 degree mentorship, and I can imagine if someone like Kari had been on that, working with me when I was at Capgemini, that would have been terrifying. So basically they spent time with you and gave you they mentored you on the way you could do your job better, of how all the things you were missing, because you were just so used to doing what you were doing. And clearly what you were able to do then was give them a bit of mentoring about what they were trying to do. But clearly the most valuable bit was their view of something we just get used to. So you can imagine Kari chairing a session in your business, for instance. And I think that's what Drew's saying. Her perspective is going to be enormously powerful, and would give you some insights into things that you just, Dan mentioned job roles, job specs, things like that. But it could be just your customer service, just listening to a call and a complaint from a customer, just how it's dealt with. It could be anything. So I really do think that kind of opportunity to give people or plug people in, new voices into those boards, those places that have the actual ability to make a difference, to do something different, I think is absolutely right. Anybody else? I
think that point that you're making there, Alex, is interesting, that it might be too big a jump for some people, just picking up Drew's question, to have, people are quite risk averse, aren't they? And they think having a new voice straight onto their main decision-making board might be quite a risky thing to do. But initially having them along and coming them to speak and to hear that it's actually far from being high risk, it's high gain, to have those kind of voices.
No, I agree.
I think what you're suggesting, Alex, is we do it stage by stage, and then that's
absolutely no. Yeah, so it's just throwing somebody into the that would be funny, but not in a good way. So throwing somebody into chairing, Andy Street's board, for instance, for his. I think Kari could do it, no problem. But actually, I would be terrified, so I wouldn't do it. So I think you're right. Appropriate steps at appropriate times. Anybody else? Any questions? I think we've got a few more minutes.
Alex, do you mind if I ask a question?
Who's that? Sorry.
It's Bal.
Yeah, hi, Bal.
Hi.
Go
on. Firstly, thanks ever so much for all of the speakers today. It's been really, really insightful and some great some great presenters. Please don't take this as a sort of a glass half full view, but I just want to try and explore this, because I know Alex and Mick will back me up here, but I'm a huge advocate of what we're trying to do here, and a huge advocate of building movements that will break the sort of the paradigms. Now we've created a burning platform and saying that digital skills or skills in general are in much more greater need going forward, and I think COVID will probably make that platform even hotter. But how do we actually break the circuit, for want of a sort of a common phrase these days, how do we break the circuit so that businesses of the future have nurturing talent a high enough priority over and above just surviving? And I'm talking particularly those sort of medium-sized enterprises and larger corporates. You know, the first thing, you know, you enter a corporate, and I'll speak from my own sort of experience. You go into a corporate, first thing you do is get indoctrinated into the corporate's norms, and every bit of entrepreneurship is kicked out of you. So you know, in a world that's going to be very, very different in a very short time, you know, how do we prioritize this nurturing of young entrepreneurial talent across some of these key businesses and organizations?
I think that's an enormous question, and certainly not one we can answer now. But can we? I think we do need to capture that. I think it is probably the ultimate question that new voices and this panel has started to surface. So Bal, I'm going to deflect it a little bit and say let's pick it up.
Paper, I think.
Yeah, well, we've got this policy and practice event, which maybe that's one of the things we could take away and say and come back to you with something more definitive. But yeah, great question.
Yeah. But as you know, more than happy to help.
Yeah, no, well, you'll have to, and you'll have to pay for lunch as well. All right, I think that's it from me, Pam. I think that's I'm not sure. Hold on. Yeah, I'm just going to sweep through quickly to see if I've missed anything. But
so we have, just while Alex is doing that, we've got a recording of this, and we'll keep a recording of the questions. And I think a lot of those questions we will try and pick up again at the next event that I mentioned on the 19th of November. So I think just to close, can Ian, can you pop up the slide? Thank you very much. So we've talked about this. So do we have the slide on new voices? Yeah, brilliant. So we've talked about quite a lot of this already, but just to reiterate in the last couple of minutes. So the Innovation Alliance, with multiple partners who have been involved in this event and yesterday's event, many of the panelists have been involved with us as well. We've, after much thought, have decided that there's a couple of areas that we can focus on in the Innovation Alliance to build this New Voices, West Midlands New Voices of Innovation campaign. We've thought really carefully about all the words in there, I have to say, and taken many soundings over it. So the series of events is the first thing that we can do, because that's what Innovation Alliance does best. We do lots of events. We've had the event yesterday and today now, and hopefully that's been a really stimulating discussion, and you'll all go away and you know, think about some of the things that you've learned and heard and been inspired by. If anybody wants to know, be put in touch with any of the panelists, anybody else that's on the call, please feel free to contact us at the Innovation Alliance, because that is the other thing that we do best, is connect people together. The next event then that I've mentioned is that the report, Alex mentioned it a couple of times, Supporting Diversity and Inclusion and Innovation. It was a nationally funded report by UKRI and Innovate UK, and it's the question we want to ask is how can we in the West Midlands respond to the recommendations in that? And the event we're planning on the 19th of November is a consultation event, really. It's we'll have people going into breakout rooms and have the opportunity to discuss some of the questions we've been talking about today in more detail. So look out for that one being advertised through our normal channels. Then the second thing that we're doing, and we have mentioned this multiple times, but we are developing this New Voices of Innovation database. The purpose of it is very much about celebration, showcasing the diverse talent that we have in the West Midlands, and that's diversity in all its forms that have been discussed on the chat today. We also want to use that to help those diverse talent to engage better with the innovation ecosystem. So that's exactly picking up Drew's point about how we can engage them with boards, committees, events, being panelists, being speakers, being mentors, every possible way that you can imagine to enable the new voices to engage. So our call to action, and the point I want to close on before I just hand to Alex to wrap up, is partners that are on this call, we need you to tell us who should be on this database. Obviously, the people, many of the people that have been involved in organising this and the speakers today and yesterday will all be very welcome to be part of that database. But we need you to tell us who these people are, because by definition, we don't know who they are, all of them. So if you have names of individuals that you recommend who you think can play these roles, then we are really keen to hear from you. So I'll close on that point and hand back to the chair of the.
Thanks. Thank you, Pam. So really just wanted to say a big thank you to everybody, specifically, obviously, Dan and Harry and Kari and Darren. Brilliant to have you here. Thank you very much for all of your insight, all of your energy, all of the points that you've raised. I forgot to do it before. I do need to do a shout out to Taryn 3D, Taryn, who created the video and is doing the game, our escape room game. If you don't know who he is, you need to find him. Not for a few months though, because he's busy. But he is absolutely fantastic, brilliant guy, and brilliant team. And obviously the GBS LEP Innovation Alliance for West Midlands, Mick and his fantastic team. Brilliant to see the young people coming through. And obviously all of my team and all the people behind the scenes, Rhiannon and all of the Ellie and Catherine and Sarah Satnam, who has been working diligently on the comms and getting this stuff out. So yeah, brilliant team effort. I think you'll all feel that we have unearthed some great insights, but also I think we are really motivated to do something. So please get involved. Please hold us to account, but to help us to make this work. So thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day. And Tech Week. Thank you to Birmingham Tech Week. Forgot about that. And Yanis. All right. Ian, are you going to take us away? Yep. All right. That's it. Thank you very much, everyone. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.